All right, guys, we're back. We're back for the recap. We're back for the puzzle piece. We're back for all the things that kind of bring this whole Neely Henry thing together. Like I said, man, these are starting to be some of my favorite videos to make. But they're my favorite videos to make. So pay attention. A lot of stuff in here. I'll kind of go over it all. All right, so buckle up. If you're new to this channel, please subscribe, like, comment. What you're going to get out of this is the understanding of why I make decisions. You know, everyone on a lot of these videos, you just see fish catches and how they caught them, and that's great, right? But I mean, there was usually a 3, 4, 5, 6 day process in how you got there, and that's what I'm trying to give y'all. I'm going to try to narrow all that down into one video and tell you how I got to where I did. Okay, so let's just jump right into it. Never been to Neely Henry, don't know much about it. When I launched there for the first time, we launched right at the bridge, which was, you know, right south of where we took off. You have two options, guys. Go up the river, you know, kind of fish in the middle of the river, or kind of go down south. You know, I don't know any different, so I just kind of started making my way down south. The reason that's semi-important is if the further up north you go, to me, there's more current. I mean, you can get right below, you know, what you would call the tail race, or where they dump the water out, and there's a whole bunch of current. I mean, it's flowing, it's getting it, and they're really related to current. It's probably smaller up there. I don't like some of that current related things because, one, you have to wait on the current. I don't know when they're going to release current. It's you always hear nightmares about places where it's a current thing and they stop releasing current, and so your whole practice is worthless. So I started making my way down south. I noticed instantly there was going to be a lot of rock. There was going to be some wood, and there was a ton of water willow. And I've heard that you're always going to catch them out of water willow, always. So that's kind of where my focus was. And then as I got further down the lake, it started to open up into more like a lake instead of a river, and you had more boat docks to fish, more offshore stuff. Okay, so, but I didn't start there. I started right off the bat, kind of drove down for a couple miles just looking. I didn't know what I was looking for. I was just looking to see how it all set up. Water willow was on the main lake. The water willow was back in creeks, and some of these creeks went a long ways back there. So right off the bat, I knew, did I need to fish the main river water willow, or did I need to hit them back in creeks? Where were they going to be? My first instinct is always to hit the main lake stuff. It just seems like that's where the majority of fish are going to be. I kept it honest, and I was trying to hit water willow right off the bat on main lake. Then I'd follow a creek back in there a little ways. The more I got back in the creeks, the more flatter it got. And it just didn't seem like it was still hot down there. And it just didn't seem like there would be a bunch of fish back there, which proved to be right. I think most guys caught them more main river. So, but I still had to check it. I had to keep it honest. But I stopped getting I didn't really get that many bites doing it, to be honest with you. Almost none. I kept making my way further down south, and I slowly started to get a bite here and there. I got my first bite on a dock, okay? And if you watch my practice, a fish followed it out from a dock. Right after that, like as soon as I got past that dock, it made a little pocket, like a little bitty nothing pocket. I mean, nothing even worth fishing in my opinion. But I just made a cast anyways because I was going across it. And it was rock, it was man-made rock. What I mean by that, it was a bank that homeowners had put rock around. I just made a cast over there, and, you know, I wasn't even paying attention. I kind of picked up on it, and I realized it was heavy. I thought I was hung up. I just kind of leaned into it, and I'm like, oh, I got a fish. And then I realized I had a big one, like a real big one. And then it comes up swirling and comes off, and I was kind of upset, you know, because new lake, was it a bass? And all these things. And I'm like, on my home lake, that would have been like a drum or something, you know? It was real big. When I say real big, like 5 to 7 pound big. And I was like, man, you know? And I was like, I just didn't have much faith in it. It was dead sunny, you know, just on some rock, no shade, no nothing. Well, I go right past that to the next dock and get my first flipping bite on an actual dock on a jig. All this is on my jig. I'll show you the jig later. So I was like, okay, there's a bite, and I keep on going, and I kind of go back in some creeks back there. I'm all over the place, you know. I'd fished creeks, I'd fished main river and everything, and I got a bite here and there, but nothing really. When I say a bite here and there, like one, maybe two, nothing I felt was really great. As I was coming back, I ended up stopping in this other creek. As I'm going down there, I flip up next to some rocks again, and there was like a little bit of overhanging bush in the water. Wasn't much. It would be enough in the springtime, but not in the fall to hold a fish. But I flip up in there, and I mean, it's like it hits it, and I'm like, oh, that's a fish. And it comes out of there, the bush, and starts shaking that bush, and I'm like, that's not a small one, like that's a big one. So I shook it off. I go a little bit further, catch a small one, hop over. I talked to my buddy Holman that happened to be in the creek, kind of let him know. I'm like, hey, I got these bites. I wonder if that means something. I go on the outside of the main river, and next thing I know, I have 2 more bites on just rock, just like the same thing. And I'm sitting here going, that first one I had, that was not a drum. That was a bass. I just happened to, like, there's the pattern. So I figured out the pattern. To me, they were on this rock. You know, I'd fished water willow forever and hadn't had a bite. I keep on trying to hit the water willow. Finally, at the end of the day, I finally get a bite flipping the water willow. And I wasn't flipping it. It was kind of like a slow half flipping, half swim jig bite. And what I mean by that is I'm flipping it in there, but I'm kind of swimming it through, letting it fall, swimming it through, letting it fall, almost sometimes all the way to the bottom. That's my only bite, though. I've done that. The next day I get out there, and now this day I'm getting out there early in the morning on a mission to catch them out of the water willow. I tie on a spinnerbait, and I start throwing it. And right off the bat, I get bit. Now the water willow in this one area where I got bit, there was water willow everywhere, and it was kind of sporadic out there. But I threw way on past the water willow up there on some of that same rock. Got a bite. Wasn't a big one, but I caught one. So then I fished all down this creek of water willow. It looked phenomenal, never had a bite. Came all the way back up, it never had a bite. Got to the mouth of the thing again on the other side. This is like an hour and a half later, and I have one swirl on it. I was like, okay, they're starting to show me they're not in the back of these creeks. I go around the point, and when I get around the point, I have one come out of the water willow, and it kind of hit away from the water willow. And it was a good one. I caught it. And then right past that, I catch another one in between the water willow and the rocks. I'm getting bit on water willow, but there's always rocks around. Always rocks. And I fished a whole bunch more, never had another bite. And I start going once again. I just find myself going down the lake again, fishing more and more stuff. Went all the way down south. I ended up throwing, when I say down south, down to the dam. Went and just looked at the dam. Had a bite or two on some main lake docks. I had a bite back in a creek on a dock. I'm fishing water willow like crazy. Still can't get a bite. I mean, I just can't get a bite out of it. So that day ended, and it was pretty tough. Same thing the next day. I'm like, okay, I'm putting that spinnerbait on, and I'm gonna go work at it really hard. Same deal. Fish, water willow, and rock. I catch like 4 or 5, get some bites, are all off rock. I mean, nothing off water willow. And at this point, I'm sitting here going, that water willow is great and all, and I know people are catching them out of it, and I hear these like reports that people are getting bit out of water willow. I cannot buy a bite out of water willow, and I'm just letting you go, guys. I'm one of those guys that likes water willow and grass. I'm from Texas. I'm from a place we don't have water willow. We have kind of like pepper grass and stuff. But I mean, this is my forte. This is like what I do is fish shallow grass. I love it, and I don't think you can catch them on a frog. I mean, I think you can, but it doesn't feel right. It doesn't feel like they want to chase. It just feels wrong to me, and I know it's not wrong. But I mean, what am I supposed to do? I cannot get a bite doing it. No matter what I do, it's just not right. And I don't want to give up on it. But guys, you just can't, even when you know something's right, you just can't keep doing it and not getting bit, right? I mean, whether it's bad luck or whatever it is. And I've seen this happen before, guys. I've seen fishing where guys are all catching them on a frog, and it's like no matter what you do, you can't get bit on a frog. It's the weirdest thing. I mean, I'm sure y'all have all had it happen where it's like, I was doing the same thing that guy was. You just don't get bit. And after 3 days, I'm not going to keep doing it and not getting bit. I still throwing that jig around, but I don't feel like the jig, it's getting bites, but I can see how it's like taking me a long time to get bit on it on these rocks during the middle of the day. The spinnerbait I know is a bite that only lasts an hour or two, because every day it seems to die away. It could probably catch them when it's real cloudy during the middle of the day, but I don't think it's going to be like that. At the end of one of the days on my practice video, driving back, and these fish start schooling on this one bend. And this bend, I've noticed, has a bunch of flats on it, really good looking offshore flats. And I'm like, I knew they weren't black bass, but I checked them anyways. I stopped, threw around a little bit, caught some white bass, and figured, okay, there's some white bass. The reason that's important is I take everything into consideration, guys. I was always watching where shad were. I was paying attention to current, and even though I didn't know if that had anything to do with anything just yet, but I was paying attention to those shad and why those white bass started schooling where they did, and it seemed like that was a really good offshore spot that possibly bass could be around. So even though white bass might be, you know, a cast or two away, pretty good chance there was black bass right there too, because it was shallow enough to where I thought they could be there. And I had noticed there were always boats around that area, but to me it wasn't anything that big of a deal. But I kept it in the back of my head. I'd also kept everything in the back of my head about how almost most of my bites were all Main River, right? More shad on the Main River, more bass on the Main River, white bass on the Main River. You're starting to follow the way my head's going, you know, it's pushing me more and more to the Main River all the time, which is good because you got to have confidence in when you're going to do something. The next day I get up and I just put that spinnerbait in my hand, and I go and I'm getting bit. Same thing on the rocks, and I'm trying out new banks just to see. As I'm going down this bank, it's about 10 o'clock. I noticed like some shad flicker or a swirl out there. I mean, something just felt funny, and I see this log that's out there, but I'm not really worried about trying to fish an isolated log out there. There's not enough of them out there to where you can run this pattern. I mean, you'd see some. You fish tournaments like this. These aren't your local tournaments. This isn't like your 150 team tournament where you go practice for one day. These guys are out here a week or two. I'd fished, I think it's called the Toyota thing on Rayburn. So I was late getting here, so I only had 2.5 days. Everyone else been out there for 4 or 5, 6 days, 7 days. I don't know how long some of these guys practice. So a lot of those isolated, obvious big trees out there, they're all gonna get hit. I mean, I know this. I don't even waste my time on those. But there was a tree out there, but I wasn't really looking at the tree yet. And so I get out there and I noticed on my map it got a little bit shallower, but that didn't even bother me either. I just went out there and I threw my rage swimmer out there, and I get bit, and I'm like, oh man. And as I'm reeling, I catch one, and it jumps, and I'm like, okay, it's not a white bass, because I was thinking it was probably a white bass. It jumps, and when I get to the boat, they're with it. I'm talking about there's some with it, like 3 or 4 with it, and the one I've got is a good one. And I'm going, whoa, whoa, whoa. I mean, my like light bulbs went off. Like, I'm sitting here going, wait a minute. Now, remind you, it's 10 o'clock on Wednesday. We have to be off the water by 12, okay? So I get this one in. I go down this shelf, and I know that it's a high spot on this shelf running parallel with the river. I never made another cast there. I keep going, and there's just my bait's hitting shad on every cast going down this shelf of like 2.5 foot of water. I didn't get any bites, but I'm just have a feeling like this is where it's all going down. Everyone's struggling out there to catch fish. You can see that it's hard to catch a limit out there. And everything we've all been doing, everyone's hitting the same thing. Everyone's hitting the same grass. Everyone's hitting the same rock. And everyone talks about how tough it is. That didn't seem very tough just then. I'm always looking for something different and something that not everyone's doing, and it's a risk. I don't know if this is even a way that's normally a way you can catch them. I have no idea. I'm just out there fishing. There's a small chance. What if all these fish that no one's catching are on these river ledges I end up going down to where those white bass were. I start on one of these ledges. Within, I think, the second cast, I catch another like 2-pound spot. And I'm sitting here going, well, okay, then now that's not an accident. This was a pattern. This was something that was viable. I keep fishing it until like 11:30, 11:40, be off the water by 12. I think about that night, and I'm like, man, I'm gonna go throw that spinnerbait in the morning. I'm gonna try to catch me one or two and see what happens for a while. I fish a spinnerbait, I never get a bite in the morning. And it's around 9, and I'm like, I better go to that spot now. I go to that spot, and they were there. Talk about some bad luck on I lose my first one. I get like 5 bites in a row that miss. I mean, I almost load up for, I don't know. It was pretty troubling. Then I throw a Carolina rig in there, just wondering. I had like 4 or 5 bites in a row, miss it. I finally hook one, catch it, and then I never get another bite there. I ended up from there fishing some other stuff, and I just worked my way down south. But I had looked on the map and tried to figure out where anything like that looked the same or close to it. All I was trying to find was, were there any places on the river that got really shallow close to the channel? And in my head, I was going over all the places where I had idled, or anything that just, you know, like areas that I thought were big areas that were good that I could go practice in. As I'm going down, I'm still hitting stuff of like where I had gotten bit in practice. So that rock stuff, you know, anywhere I'd got bit on rock, I fished it. Boat ducks that I had hit and got bit on, I hit them. I make my way down there, but I'm stopping too on these ledges that I've never fished, but I just kept messing with it. I stopped on this one area down south on this bend, and it was a pretty big area. I'm like, okay, I'm just gonna go down it and fish it all. As I'm going down it, fishing all, I'm seeing shad, which I knew was a big deal. And next thing I know, I catch a small one. And I was like, okay, here's a new spot. I ended up catching 2 from that spot. And I'm like, oh man, like, so now I'm like, I know this is the thing. I know this is a way to catch them. I just don't, man, it's so hard in a big event with money on the line, with qualifications on the line, and I'm out here practicing new water. I mean, that's really what I'm doing during the tournament. That mentally, that is one of the hardest things to do, is to just continually hit new water, hoping you're on something that might or might not work. It's worked a little bit, but you know, it's the great thing is I hadn't really got bit doing a lot of the other stuff I'd got bit in practice. So I'm like, you know, what's it going to hurt now? So I keep doing all this. I don't get any more bites. I come back up with minutes left in the tournament. I stop on another spot that seemed right, and I catch number 4. Guys, I know I'm not in the top 10 or anything like that after day 1, but man, I'd caught 4. All 4 of them were doing something different that basically I'd figured out in an hour left in practice. That's a big accomplishment for me. I look at that as like, hey man, that's something to build off of. Day 2 rolls around. I'm going to start on that spot. Now I'm going to see what happens, and I think I'm going to run this all day. And sure enough, I start on it, I catch one, and then I start running more and more stuff like that. I had forgotten I had had a bite on day 1 off this little island, and I missed it. So as I worked my way down there, I didn't hit that little island, but I went back to that other point. The shad weren't on it. I ended up catching one there, a small one. I hit a whole bunch more stuff, nothing. As I'm coming back, I'm trying to like, okay, maybe the ledge thing isn't the only pattern. So I started hitting things, different banks, different boring looking banks. And there was grass there, but I was staying away from the grass, and I was just noticing more and more stuff, and I'll show you all that. And all of a sudden I catch one off this flat mud, nothing. Well, I'm looking down this bank, and I'm going, there's a lot of water willow down the bank, and it's just flat, muddy, and it's flat all water willow in the back, and I'm just going, let's just go down it. The reason I'm going to go down it is, in practice I had gone down it fishing the water willow, and I saw an explosion right in front of the boat, right outside from the water willow. So I had always kept that in mind. I'm pretty sure it was a bass. Still feels right, even though it's kind of that mud bank. My other spot was a hard spot, and the other places I had caught were a hard spot, except the last one of the day on day 1 felt more like mud. Going down it, I get a bite, so, you know, bow up on it. I instantly know it's a big one. It was like a 3-pound spot. And I'm going, oh my gosh, man, I just opened up a whole new water. And what I mean by opened up a whole new water, like I wasn't looking for stuff like this. So I'm going, okay, so now my wheels are turning, right? They're going 90 to nothing, going, where else around here? Because it's getting pretty late in the day. Where else can I go do this stuff? As I get to the end of this point, I want to call it a point, but what it is it's an inside bend to the river. So the river, I'll show you, the river bends out. This is the inside part where it flattens out. It's kind of the water you don't run. You always want to hang to the outside because that's where the river channel is. Like I said, my map doesn't show it great. So I'm trying to stay in this water column of like 4 foot, trying to throw in water 2 foot. That was always my goal. I'm going down it, and I'm like, this is it. This is right. Like in my head, I'm like, there's a fish here. I'm telling my co-angler, I'm like, there's a fish here. I know there is. Like I know it. Like this is a spot. And I'm going down it, and all of a sudden a 5-pounder comes up for like 7 or 8 seconds, blowing up. I mean, a flip from the boat. And this is the problem we run into on practicing water we haven't practiced yet. There was a subtle outwards bend to that ledge from the 2 foot ledge I was kind of trying to fish. It came out a little bit more right there. I didn't know it. I would have known it if I had practiced it. It wasn't on the map. And I was like, so my boat basically ran on top of it. And I knew I'd messed it up. I mean, I'd messed it up. I don't know if I'd have caught that fish, but those are just some of the disappointments you have when running new water. So I was pretty disappointed in there. I ended up going back to my first starting spot and catching number 4, and I tried some new water, but I only ended up with 4 that day. But I felt like I had put so many more of the puzzle pieces together. It's kind of what I learned from practice to the tournament days on how I put everything together. It was kind of the mindset of what I was thinking and what I was trying to accomplish. Let's kind of go look at the map and look at the baits and see what I was throwing and what I was looking for. I had rigged up different spinner baits, okay? And, you know, either 1/2 ounce spinner baits, and I even rigged up some like baby burner type spinner baits. And I was always trying to figure out if it was a spinner bait thing, like a color deal, subtle deal, smaller deal. I honestly don't think it was. I think you just had to get a spinner bait there. Bradley Holman had caught him on a spinner bait. He caught one of the biggest bags on day 2, and it was all on a spinner bait in that water willow. He just put his head down and just fished it all. And he started figuring out that there were stretches that were better. He was slowing it way down. We had probably fished too fast in practice. I don't think even a lot of other guys were doing it. I mean, he did it behind everyone and caught him. That's Bradley Holman, though. With a spinnerbait, he can do it. But that's kind of what, that was probably a pattern. We were on the right pattern of the spinnerbait. You know, I was on it, but I just never got bit out of the water willow. So it was hard for me to just go do that, you know. The jig I was throwing that I got most of my bites on, and you've seen this. It looks all kind of tore up because I've been throwing it a bunch. If you've ever seen The Only Jig You Ever Need, that was it. It's my 1/2 ounce Strike King structured jig, trimmed up, not as fat, got a little rage crawl, the baby rage crawl on the end of it, and that's what I had. Y'all know I throw the Rage Swimmer like crazy. So that's my Rage Swimmer. I got the Strike King Squadron head, 3/8 ounce, and the 3.75 Ghost Shad swim bait. So of all the fish, of the 8 fish I caught in the tournament, 7 of them came on that. The other one came on a Carolina rig, game haul. So every day we would launch from right here. As you can see, I never even went upriver. I just didn't do it. I didn't, you know, you only have so much time. So a lot of these big areas, these big creeks, you can see I went in some of them, like this one. I went in it twice just to make sure and went all back there because I got bit at the mouth of this thing pretty good. But every time I went back in there, I never got a bite. And so I would try these places back in there, never get a bite. And everything, all my bites, I would always come out main river. And as I go down, this was a where I caught them white bass. Okay, and I'm gonna show y'all something. There's a reason. You can see how the main river's right here, and there's these bars, okay? These high spots out here. I don't know if you can see that. See how it shows 9 to 11, but they're way shallower than that. And that's why I said this base map doesn't really do a great job, but I had to just use a lot of visual, the way it looks. Looking around, sometimes you can just tell that it was shallower. When you get more of those lines together, a lot of times you can tell this was just an area that they got shallow. This is where I pulled up, and you can see like that first waypoint is where I got bit in practice. The second waypoint is a brush pile I found out there. Kind of had an idea that it was a place bass might get. The mouth of this thing, I never caught a fish there. Shallow area right next to the river, places I would try. There was these islands down here. I tried to get around these islands and fish them. Another island right here I got bit on. This was a creek I got bit in. This was one of the best creeks I got bit in of anywhere. It's shallow out here, but it was too deep. It's shallow, yes, but it was more 5 to 7 foot, and I knew that was going to be a lot harder to cover water that way fast. And it's the same thing, another bend, and you notice I had fished it shallow up there, right? You see my markings where I had fished shallow, but there was this shallow ledge that went across this bend, and that's where I got bit right there. I got bit on the shallowest part. I don't even have waypoints. I didn't need waypoints, but that little 8, where it says 8, it's really about 3. That's where I would get bit. And so I was always like learning those areas, like trying to figure out more and more of those areas. There wasn't a bunch of them on here. I think there was one right here. I know I can get bit right here, but I just never did. And I went all the way down here, you know, looking for more of those areas. But the further south you got, the more ledges you got, which made it harder to pinpoint where they might be. So I tried to still focus more up here. There is this flat right here. Remember me talking about this like mud flat, and this mud flat had all these water willow. It was all water willow all through there. And there was one little spot. If you can see it, see that little point? I mean, there was almost no water willow on it. It was flat, muddy, and I got bit right there. Well, as I just come down here, that's where I catch my big one, was right there, right where that little black smudge is. I don't really know why, but it didn't really matter to me. I was gonna fish this whole stretch. And when I got down here, this is where that flat came out, and this is where I saw that 5-pounder. And you can see the map, yeah, it shows a point. So I knew that I was on the point, but we're talking 5 to 10 foot. Another little mark out where that fish came out. It doesn't show it. A great map might have shown it. I just didn't have it. And so that's what I was looking for, guys. And there was more of it. You know, there's more of that stuff up here. I had found this flat where I had gotten bit, this stretch. See, it doesn't even show it. It shows it being 9 and 10 foot, but I found it to be a lot shallower, and there were some stumps on it. I did catch one there, a small one, and had another bite. You know, there's just certain places that looked right to me. This is where I caught one of the ones. See, the map doesn't even show it. A lot of this stuff you had to use was visual. You had to kind of just look at the layout of the land and then hope that there was a spot like that. So we're trying to put all those aspects together, from the main river to backs of creeks to what part of the river do you want to fish. The further south you get, the more open you get, the more docks you get. The middle section had more water willow, the rocks, and then these ledges. I mean, we have to put all that together. You have to put it all, and then you have to start picking the small little bitty pieces. Like, you have to pick up on the smallest little clues to point you in the right direction. Problem is, then you got to decide if some of those clues are wrong. And what I mean by that is, we're always like, you don't want to pick up on something that didn't matter or leads you down the wrong direction. Whether it be oh, I got bit and there was this tree around, and realized that the tree had nothing to do with it. Or I got bit on this little shallow ledge and realized that the ledge had nothing to do with it. It got shallower, or there was more current there, was a bend. So that's what we're all trying to figure out. And sometimes we get those wrong. I was misled on that first ones I got. I wasn't misled, but that hard bottom is something we all look for. I just didn't think about them being on this like mud, flat looking deal. They were on that too. And maybe not as good, but there were some on there, and maybe, and this is a big deal, maybe no one fished for them. So maybe no one ever threw a bait next to them. So those were fish that were unpressured, which they might not be the best spot in the world, but unpressured fish are still better than pressured fish that won't bite, right? That's it, guys. I hope you like it. I hope all that makes sense. I hope that helps y'all start breaking down these big bodies of water that you've never been to, and helps you try to start putting these pieces together to help you come up with a game plan to go fish one of these tournaments. You know, a tournament here, a club tournament, or just catch fish, guys. I mean, this is just a way to catch fish. Tournaments are irrelevant at this point. It's just a way to catch a fish. So hope you guys liked it, man. Let me know what y'all think. I'm gonna be working on the Cherokee here in a week, so get ready for that one too. See y'all, guys.